One of the things that women fear in midlife is becoming irrelevant. When we feel like we are no longer needed or that we matter to anybody, I think that is one of the biggest fears, besides aging, the common thing that women tend to worry about. I think just feeling irrelevant or not needed is one of those biggest fears that we can carry as women. So I was thinking about this because I had a discussion with my two teenage kids. I have three kids, and two of them are teenagers. And they were talking about how, I don't know how we came to this, but about how they viewed me or thought of me. And they're like, yeah, mom, you're just, you're kind of in the background. You're like the machine that makes everything work, just in the background. And I was like, oh, really? And they're like, yeah, you're just there. And I thought, how interesting. I am getting to that place where these children of mine don't no longer need me as much. And I can imagine this for women who have their kids, who are empty nesters, who have their kids have left the house. That the feeling of irrelevance can be very much disturbing, painful, something that people dread. And I remember feeling when we were having this conversation with my kids, like, oh my gosh, I am becoming irrelevant. These children are starting their own lives and they're starting to look, they are becoming their own person kind of person thing. And they're starting their own lives. And I'm no longer needed as much as I was when they were young. And as they get older, my daughter's going to college. I'm really going to be needed as much, and at least not in the same capacity that I was when she was young. So that's what made me think of this discussion, like, okay, so how do I reframe this power, this question or this thing about being irrelevant in people's lives, to what is the power in being irrelevant? And therefore my discussion that I'm having today, what is the power that is there in becoming irrelevant? Instead of us worrying about it, instead of us, being sad, feeling like our worth and our value is going downhill, what is the power in being irrelevant in people's lives, especially those that you've taken care of? That's kind of where I am in reframing the whole discussion and finding the power and living in that power. So the thing that happens to us, why we end up being so afraid, and I'm drinking my tea, is that our lives, a lot of times, consciously or not consciously, I think a lot of times unconsciously, we build our lives around the roles that we play, right? Our identity was based on when we were needed by people. We're needed by the spouse, the husband. We're needed by the children. We're needed by our parents who are aging. And so when they die, or when your parents or the marriage ends, or we were maybe needed by friends, in friend groups that we're in. And when that is over, or your children leave the nest, we feel empty. We feel sad. We feel alone. We feel like we're irrelevant. And that doesn't do well with a lot of us. People struggle over this. And as I'm looking to that part of my life, because right now I do feel like, yeah, I'm not needed in a lot of things. Like they said, I'm just in the background. I'm the machine that makes things run. You're no longer needed for all the things that you were doing for them to solve their problems. You're no longer needed maybe to run back and forth with them, doing different things. So maybe the role that you played, where you were the Uber driver, you were the housekeeper, the maid, you were the mother, the wife, you were whatever you were, the caretaker, that role is coming to an end or is ended. And you find yourself in a place where you're like, nobody needs me. Nobody needs me. And you realize that they can live their lives. I think this is the realization that is the most painful for women, a lot of us, is that these people can actually function without you. Let's sit on that for a moment. That the children that you helped raised, that you were taking care of and doing everything for them, they've come to a place in their lives where they don't need you and they can really just live their lives without you. And I've started thinking about that as I'm approaching 50, because I'm going to be 50 this week. Sorry, 49 this week. What am I saying? I'm not 50 yet. I'm approaching almost 50. I've just started having this kind of thinking discussions in my head that, and not to sober things up, but you realize your irrelevance in life, in people's lives, when you start thinking, one day you'll be gone. Hopefully you go before your children. And a few years from that, 10 years, 15, 20 years, people might not even remember that you existed. I know this is such like a down. I'm not trying to make you feel sad. But it's just the thought that I've been having, because I think of my relatives that I was very close to that died, and how over many years, 10 or so years, I don't think about them that much. Like, they are not really relevant. Apart, you think of them with good memories, whatever memories, bad or good, whatever relationship you had with them. But the fact that they're not part of my life, I don't think about them. I am living my life, right? And the same will happen to us when our kids grow up, that you're not their everyday part of life. They've moved on, they're building their lives, and you want them to, right? We don't want them to stay home, and no. I want my kids to go and build their own lives. But with that comes the sadness that you're no longer needed, or that you'll not be remembered. And you have been the caretaker. You have been the one holding everybody. And now all of a sudden you're no longer needed. And this is very, very difficult. And this is, I think, part of the struggle women have in midlife, is the struggle of nobody needs me. And you feel irrelevant. You feel like there's nothing to add to anybody's life. There's nothing out there, especially in relationships. And the same feeling also happens in work, in our careers, in our businesses as we're aging, is the fact that people look at you like, oh, you're irrelevant. Your opinions don't matter. Your wisdom doesn't matter. Your whatever experience doesn't matter, because you're kind of, getting old. So how can we reframe this to where it's become something that works for us instead of against us? So where we shift the identity from the roles that we played for people in our lives, the wife, the mother, the caretaker, the sister, the friend, whatever role that we played, into an identity that is based around, that is really your own, not on what you have, been doing for other people. How do we shift our way of thinking from, have become irrelevant to, oh, there's power here. There's an opportunity here. This is where I want to take you, because this is where I'm taking myself, where to take myself when I came to that realization that my kids are going to be out of the house soon, all of them. And my identity cannot be wrapped around that. My identity cannot be wrapped around my job, my roles, the businesses I've built, whatever. They cannot be rolled. I cannot have my identity in that. My identity really has to be in Christ. And as a follower of Jesus Christ, that is important, that my identity is in the right place. That avoids all the depression, whatever people go through when people in their lives leave, because your identity should never be in what you did, in who you were for people in your life, but really in God. So what is the power in not being needed? I think that one of the biggest things is that you carry less. You carry less stuff for people. You stop managing other people's emotions. You stop carrying their burdens of their emotional whatever state they are in. You no longer have to carry your children's emotional things. You no longer have to carry, if you're somebody who wanted to manage your husband or your relatives or your in-laws or your friends' emotional things. You don't. You come to a place when you know you're no longer needed, that you do not have to carry their stuff anymore. You don't have to carry their emotional baggage or whatever anymore. And it is actually a relief in some way. I love taking care of my children. I love, my relationships. But with that comes this responsibility, especially with your kids, where you're managing their emotions a lot of times as the mother. And there is a mental load you carry because of that. But I think once they are living their own lives, you don't have to carry that load as much. When you are concerned for them, you pray for them, but you don't have to carry the emotional and mental load that you did when they were young. So that is one shift that happens. That is the part of not being relevant in people's lives, is that you do not have to carry their stuff. They are grown up, or if they're adults, they should have been grown up anyway, and you don't have to carry their stuff. All right, so we are dropping, another thing is that we are dropping these identities that were based on the roles in our lives. We are taking on the identity that who we are in God, who God created us to be. This is the chance we get to do that. If we never did that before, we get to do that now, where we are really taking on the identity that is truly ours, where our values, the things that we care about and desire, are coming up in the forefront more than being the back seat while we are taking care of everybody else. Something else about being irrelevant is that I think one of the biggest things is that you are in a place to now know the difference between being needed and being chosen. This is I think one of the deepest insights about just coming to a place of the power of not being needed by anyone, of just becoming irrelevant to people in your life, is that, people need you a lot of times because they need to survive. Your children need you because they need to survive. Without you, they'll probably not be there or harmed, whatever. We are there because they need to survive and they need us for us. The family systems, the things that you've put in place, the organization, the things, they need you so that they can function, right? The running of the home needs you so that you can function, so that they can function. The career you've built, the business you've built, all those things, especially careers, they need you because they want to make a profit, right? So there's something that people are getting from needing you. The need is because of how you perform. The need is what you can give. The need is the things that you add to those people. But when these dynamics change, do you or the people in your life get to choose you? When they no longer need you to perform so that the house can run, when they no longer need you to perform so they can survive. I'm talking about your children here. Do they get to choose you? And this is very big because a lot of relationships are based on codependency. And yes, as your children, they need to depend on you until they are grown and leave their homes, leave your home to start their own. But there's a big thing, big thing, I believe, in being chosen. That is a big deal. To exist in relationships, to be in relationships with people, whether it's your family, your children, your spouse, your friends, your relatives, where you are being chosen. Not because somebody needs you, not because of what you've done for them, not because of the money that you make for them, not because of the lifestyle you provide for them, not because of how you make them feel. Right? Because sometimes people need you in their lives because of you make them feel good about themselves, yet there's nothing in return towards you. And so you want to be in a relationship where you are being chosen and you're also choosing. That you choose, to be in relationship with that child and they choose to be in relationship with you. Are they going to call you now that they don't live with you? They don't have to. Now that you don't tell them to check on their mom, are they going to call? Are they going to want to spend time with you now that they don't have to? There's no obligation. Do they get to choose you for who you are, not because of what they need from you or what you do for them? Do they get to choose you because they actually want to spend time? And the people you're in relationship with, the friends and the relatives, whatever, this is the chance they, where you're no longer needed is when you're no longer doing things, performing things for those people. Do they get to choose you? Do they invite you in your lives when you're not doing anything for them? When there's no obligation? When you're not living under obligation, do they get to choose you? Because those kind of relationship where you are chosen, and you are also choosing those in your life, they're more intentional and they're more authentic. Because any relationship where there's codependency, where there's somebody needs something from someone, is not, it's healthy for children as they're growing up, but it's unhealthy as they get to be adults, right? We don't want that as adults. And we don't want that in any other relationship in our lives. So we want to be in a place where we are no longer in relationships that are built on dependency, but built on people making choices. When you look at even our relationship with God, right? God does not force anyone to love him. He does not force anyone to come to him. I mean, he does all he can to bring people to him, to accept Jesus. But he's not going around forcing everybody to be a robot, to obey him, to listen to him, to love him, to want to be in his presence. He's not. Why? Because he wants us to choose. This is the act of free will, because you cannot truly say you love somebody if they're under any obligation towards you. If somebody feels obligated to do things towards you because of whatever, then it's not really true love and it's not authentic. In the same way that God extends this free will to choose him or not to choose him, we want people in our lives to choose us. And I want to talk about this a little bit more. Probably another video, I'll talk about this. But what I've noticed, just living in America, in the West, and the society here, is that there's a lot of parenting that happens where people are parenting from the fear of their children not wanting anything to do with them when they're older. And I'm not saying, I'm not saying you should be abusive to your children, blah, blah, blah. No. But I've just noticed, just, talking to people as I go on my life and what's happening in different friend groups and people that I come in contact with and what I hear, there's a fear that parents, they're afraid that their kids are not going to like them. So they parent their kids as wanting to be more friends with their kids than they are actually parenting. And I know people have different style of parenting. This is just my own opinion, my own observation, my own experience. Is that if you're parenting your child from that fear that, well, I have to be nice, I have to be, not that you should be harsh or anything, that you are not doing the discipline that is required, you are not doing the correction that is required, you are not teaching them the things, the life skills and the things that is required because you are afraid that there's going to be resistance and rebellion and therefore they'll not like you, or you're afraid that they're not liking you now, they'll grow not to like you. And I've heard this from people actually saying, I want my kids to like me. And if that stops you from doing your job as a mom, as a parent, because you're afraid that your children are not like you, I don't think that's right. In some way, I think you're setting your kids up for failure because you really have no power towards them choosing you, no matter how nice you are. And I feel like people, actually, when you don't discipline a child, it means you don't really love them. That's my opinion. You can disagree. I think there's discipline. And of course, when I talk about discipline, we're not talking about harmful things. We're talking about discipline that is good. But if you're living your life parenting from that angle of, I don't want my kids to, I want my kids to like me, I want my kids to like you, and your decisions are based on that, I think you're going to actually damage them more than you just being a parent and parenting and discipline as you should and loving your kids as you should. Because this fear that people are not going to like you and you're doing things, I think in some ways also manipulation in some way, I think, because they should be free to choose, right? You want your kids to choose you, not because you try to manipulate your way into them choosing you, but because you did the right thing as a parent and you parented and they choose you. They choose you to be in their lives or not. And also we cannot live our lives being afraid of that, because I think in other ways it means you are not going to have your own life. And you should have your own life. You're created to have your own purpose, your own calling. That you should not be hinging yourself or attaching yourself to your children. So whether really, I believe, whether your kids want a relationship with you, I think you do the best to be the best parent that God has created to be. And then you leave the rest to God and to them. They have the free will to choose. And you'd rather they choose you. Not because you were too nice to them and didn't discipline them, because you were their parent and you did the right thing. Because that is a more authentic relationship. Again, going back to what is authentic, you want to be chosen, not because you manipulated your way into it, but because you did the right thing and they get to choose whether they want you in their life or not. And again, we have no control over that. We can be the nicest, spoil our kids, whatever, and they'll still choose otherwise. Just like you have no control over your kids, what they do in their lives. You can teach them the right way, they still have the free will to decide how they want to live their lives. So I don't know, that's just my 2 cents there, but we can talk about that some other time. But I just wanted to talk about that because I've seen that, because people want their kids to be very attached to them and to live their lives, connected to these children, that the children have no space to become themselves, to live their own lives. We have to be free from that. But we want to be chosen in these relationships. And we get to see that when people don't depend on us anymore. When you're not their anchor, their emotional anchor, they're this, we get to see if people choose us. And I would rather I would rather know that someone chooses me to be in their lives than me manipulating my way into it, me trying to convince them that I'm worthy of their time, right? I would rather I'm shown that, no, I don't choose you to be in my life. And I'm okay with that. I'm really okay with the truth than living under lies and pretense and superficial relationship, because those are draining, because we all know that this is a pretense. At least for me, I cannot handle superficial stuff. I'd rather not have that person in my life. And I know for your children and stuff is very hard, right? It's something very difficult that people have to work through. But I think it all goes to where you are anchored, where your identity is. Because if it's in your children and your role as the mother and things like this happen, you will be shattered. So it's going back again to where's our identity, so that we are okay when people choose us or not choose us. We're still okay, because my identity is not in them choosing me. I would rather have the authentic relationship than some superficial version of something. So this is one of the powerful realization we get in terms of, when you're no longer needed, when you've become irrelevant to people, is it reveals that the type of relationships you have, whether it's authentic or not, because they get to choose, because now they no longer need you. The other thing that happens in midlife when we become irrelevant is that your life actually becomes yours. There's a season in our lives that our lives are really not ours. Actually, our lives are really not ours anyway, they belong to God. But I'm talking in relation to people in our lives, that there is a season when the kids have grown, when maybe the spouse is gone, maybe the friendships are gone, when whatever obligations we have, relatives' obligations, the aging parents are gone, that you realize that your life is becoming on, when you're no longer climbing that corporate ladder or building that business or building a family. And of course, all these responsibilities, they are good in their season. And now we're talking about the fact that you're in a season where you don't have those endless responsibility. You're not always reacting, because really in your 20s and 30s and even early 40s, feel like you're always reacting to situations in your life. And midlife, I think, brings about personal agency, where there's your life is no longer structured around other people's needs, around other people's development, like your children's development. Your life is no longer consumed with those things, right? It's for me, being 49, I still have kids who are young, or teenagers. So as much as it's getting less and less, and I know eventually when they go to college, it's going to be I'm not going to be that. I'm not going to be playing that role, but I still have to manage the development of my children, their emotional state, their physical state, their needs and stuff. But of course, as they're getting older, it's becoming less and less, right? And eventually it's going to be gone. So what happens when that is gone is that you are becoming, your life is starting to belong to you. You get to ask, what do I actually want? Because you're not running around trying to build everybody else up. You know, it's not what do the family needs. It's not what the children need. It's not what the society expects of me. It is more like, what do I want for myself? And what does God want for my life? What is the life that I'm supposed to build now in this season? So this is, I think, the power, the gift of that becoming irrelevant. And us really looking at it from a different way of, you know, sad and, oh my gosh, I feel this, I feel down, and, you know, getting into depression because nobody needs us anymore. But looking from the lenses of, what is the power? What do I get to do now that people don't need me? How do I get to live my life? How do I get to design my life, redesign it to what I really want now that people don't need me in their lives? Because there are seasons to save others. You know, when building a family, whatever, that is a season. But all those seasons also come to an end. And every season deserves a different question. Even the season we feel irrelevant, it deserves a question and an answer. Because now you're not just doing things for your family, it's more about your calling. You know, because part of our calling is as a mother is to take care of our children, to pray for them and do all the stuff. But in a place where they are no longer in the home, in a place where you're no longer needed, where you've become irrelevant, is the time that really God starts to use you, I believe, in a very different way for whatever calling that you're in. So we are never really irrelevant to God. There's not a time that we are irrelevant, because we're not created for irrelevancy. It's just that we tend to feel that way because, again, we've attached our identity to the roles. And so when we untangle ourselves from that identity crisis that we seem to have, we are in a place where we can appreciate the season that others call us irrelevant in their, or they don't need us in our lives. We can be in a place to really appreciate that and to see what the next step is. And this is the second chapter. This is what the second chapter of our lives is about. It is about discovering our identity, discovering the calling, the direction that we are to go into, discovering who we are without all those roles, and redesigning our lives for the second part of this life, for this next chapter that we are in. And we are no longer doing things out of obligation. We're no longer in relationships out of obligation, but really out of choice. On their end, on our end, we are now getting to choose a lot of things at this stage in life. So that's what I wanted to share with you. And if you're new here, my name is Janet, and this is the Second Act Collective. And please subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and share this with your friends, family members, and also join our community. The link is below. That's our Substack community where I go deeper into things. But this is all I had to share today. I will see you next time. Have a great day.